Twitch event subs are hard. If you're watching this video, you probably want to make your own super custom follow and sub alerts. Or maybe you want to do something cool with channel points. Or maybe you want to make the most hype train you can possibly hype. You've probably already gone through the Twitch event sub documentation and figured out it's not as great as it could be. And you may have already watched my previous video on this very topic. So why am I making this video again? Well, since I made the last video on this topic, I've learned a lot more about the event sub system. And on top of that, Twitch has updated the event sub API to the point where that video is no longer entirely accurate. So I figured I would do a bit of redesign to that system in order to make it both current and easier for me to update, so I don't need to continuously make this video over and over again unless Twitch just drastically changes everything again. So to get started, I would recommend going to the GitHub repository that's in the description. This is the original GitHub for the system that I built originally, and that will also be updated by the time that you see this video. So the first thing that we need to do is some initial setup, which is actually still the same from the original video. So you're going to need to install a few things, which you'll find all the links in the GitHub repo. So you'll first need to install Node.js if you haven't already, and either the LTS version or the current version will suffice. And if you're pulling this repo directly, you can just use npm install. If you're doing this from scratch, you can put in the commands in the command line that I have on the screen right here once you have pulled in the repo or have started your own npm project. After that, you need to register your Twitch app on dev.twitch.tv, which I'm sure you've probably already done that at this point. But if you haven't, it should be easy enough to find through these links. And you also need to set one of your OAuth redirect URLs to https localhost 4000/redirect, like right here. After that, go in the source folder of the repo and set up the config.json file, which also has instructions on what you'll need to fill that in correctly. Then you'll need to install Chocolatey, which will then give you the ability to install OpenSSL using the commands that you see on the screen. And then next up, you'll need to install ngrok and authenticate it following the process that they give you through that site. And once you have all of that installed, what you need to do is you need to move into the source/certification or cert folder, so that we can set up a self-signed certificate, because Twitch requires that we set all of this up through HTTPS. And so since we're trying to do all of this on our computer instead of just deploying this to the internet and possibly getting charged for stuff, we want to do this the free way. So we need to create a SSL certificate on our computer that we can then use HTTPS with. So once you get all of that stuff installed, go into the cert folder within the source folder and open up your command line. And first type in the first command here, which is OpenSSL genrsa-outkey.pim, which should generate a key file for you. And then on the second command here, it's going to ask you a number of questions, and I'll have a screenshot for you of the things that you should see on the screen. You can take all of the default options for that except for the common name. That's the only thing you need to have specific to your purposes. And for that, you want it to be localhost :4000. And then once you've run that command and put in that information it asks for, you can then execute the third command that you see right here, the OpenSSL xfile 509 command. And at that point, we can actually start with the coding portion of this project. So the first thing you're going to want to do is we want to set up our imports. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull in the Twitch chatbot functionality because we're going to do this through a chatbot, same as last time. So after you install those packages, what you want to do is you want to, in your source folder on the left over here, you want to create a file called bot.js right here. And you also want to create a file called config.js right here. And then you also want to create a HTML folder with a file called app access redirect.html. And you just want it to kind of look like this, which is pretty simple. So all we need this for is to verify that we have given Twitch the correct permissions to our account so that we can use the API system for the event subs specifically. You don't need to worry about this preparation.js file. That's what I'm using to record this video and keep things actually on track. So don't worry about that. And you'll also notice in the search folder right here is where we generated those files to create our self-signed certificate from earlier. So to start the coding, we need to get our imports in here. So let's create a constant and call it TMI, and that is going to be equal to a require tmi.js. Next up, we want to import our configuration file. So const configuration equals require, and then the file that we created earlier. So /config. Next up, we want to import Axios, and we'll also need access to the built-in node file system package. Next up, we'll pull in Express, and then we will initialize an Express instance. And we'll specifically call this HTTPS app because, as the name implies, we will be launching this within HTTPS. And in order to do that, what we're going to do is we are going to set up a HTTPS server using the Express HTTPS app. So what we'll do is we'll say HTTPS server, which will equal a require HTTPS. And then we will chain in a create server, which will take in a JSON object as a argument. And that JSON object will first require a key parameter, which is going to pull in the file system dot read file sync, and then that will take in the cert folder / key.pem. And then the second attribute is going to be cert, which will also be a fs.readFileSync. And we're using sync here because we specifically want our keys in our files, etc., to be pulled in before we do anything else, because if we don't, things could get rather hairy. So this one is the cert folder / cert.pem. And then the second argument right after this JSON object is going to be the HTTPS app. So that's how it's going to let us use Express. Then the next thing we're going to need is actually the built-in crypto package that comes with Node, so we can run some cryptography on some of the EventSub stuff. So I'm going to say crypto equals require crypto. And this is not the same thing as cryptocurrency, if you're wondering. This is cryptography, which is a similar yet very different thing. And the last thing we want to import is the HTTPS package itself. So next up, we're going to allow ourselves to make a Twitch bot really quick, which is not difficult at all. So we'll get the bot stuff out of the way first, and then we'll get the EventSub specific stuff out of the way. So right after all of our imports, we want to create a constant and call it Chatbot. And that's just going to equal a new tmi.client. And as an argument, we're going to throw in our configuration file. Then we're going to set up a listener for the chatbot. So we're going to say chatbot.on. And this is going to listen for any messages coming from your chat. So the event type we're looking for is just message, and the function that it's going to run whenever it receives a message is going to be a function that we're going to create in a second called a chat message handler. And then we simply want to connect the chatbot to our chat itself. So we'll say chatbot.connect. And next up, we will actually create that chat message handler. So we'll just make a function calling it chat message handler. And this will take in 4 parameters, which is channel, user state, message, and self. For our purposes, though, we actually only need the message parameter here. But you can use all of these for a lot of different chatbot functionality, which you can actually learn more about in my Build a Twitch Bot from Scratch series, where we actually use all of this to some degree or another. And I'll leave a link to that in the description. But for now, we're just going to stay with the Twitch EventSub stuff. So within this function, what we want to do is we want to have a constant called word array. And that is going to equal message.split. And we're going to split this by spaces. So you want to have a string with just a space in it. So this is going to give us every word in a chat message so that we can check if there is a chat command within the chat. So next up, we need to set up an if statement. So we're going to say if the word array at index 0, and we specifically need this to be to lowercase, so that it doesn't matter what your chat does, they could put this into whatever format they want, this will still run. And if this is equal to a string, exclamation point, end stream, and within this condition, what we're going to do is we're going to tell Twitch that we're done with our stream and we no longer need to use the EventSub system. And the reason that we need to do this is that once we subscribe to the events for getting follows, getting subs, getting raids, and so on, if we continuously subscribe to those events every time that we start our stream, but we never unsubscribe from those events, eventually we will no longer be able to subscribe to any events until we unsubscribe from the ones we've already used. So eventually the bot will just break if you don't do that. So we're setting up the functionality so that whenever we end our stream, we can unsubscribe from all the events that we've subscribed to so that we can use them in the next stream. So to do that, we want to make an Axios call. So we're going to say Axios.get. And whenever I make Axios calls, I always like to, before putting in the get arguments, I like to immediately put a .then and then a .catch. And then I like to format them for readability because otherwise I kind of get myself confused. And then I like to work on the catch clause first so that I don't forget to do it in a bit. And this is just going to be a simple error parameter, which leads into an arrow function where we will simply log out the error. And in our Axios.get call, what we want to do is we want to pass in 2 arguments, and I'll copy and paste them here. So the first one that we want is the URL of where we're trying to get our subscription. So this URL allows us to know which EventSub events that we're actually subscribed to. And then we want to pass in the configuration of our HTTP headers. And in this case, it's our client ID, and this is case sensitive. And that is coming from our configuration file that we set up earlier and the API key. And the authorization is our access token that we're going to set up in just a moment. And this is a bearer token, so you need to have a string with the word bearer, capital B, and then a space, plus the access token. Like I said, we're going to set that up shortly. And in our then clause, what we want to do is we want to have a response, which leads into an arrows function. And within this arrows function, we want to have an if-else statement. So we want to say if the response dot status is equal to 200, and that means if we get a status code of 200, that means that we have successfully pulled in the data that we're looking for. Then we will run the actual unsubscribing events, or calls to the Twitch API. But if we don't get a response status of 200, what we want to do is we want to log out the response.status as well as the response.data. Now, if we do successfully pull in the subscription data that we're subscribed to, what we want to do is we want to create a constant called subscribed events. And we want this to be equal to our response.data. And we also want to log out for debugging purposes, because sometimes this will go wrong on us. But that's what actually tells me when I need to update the EventSub configurations, which I'll get to in a minute. So we need to log out a string saying the number of events to unsubscribe, and then the length of the subscribed events array that we're pulling in. And now we need to loop over all of the events that we have subscribed to. So we're going to set up a for loop here. And within this for loop, we're going to make another Axios call. So here we're going to call Axios.delete, which makes sense in the context of what we're doing. And just like before, after the delete call, we're going to put in a then clause and then a catch clause and format it for readability. Start off within our catch clause. And so since we're already using an error parameter further down, we're going to call this one webhook error, which will lead in to an arrow function where we will log out webhook unsubscribe error and then the webhook error. And then for the delete call, the URL that we're going to be using is we're going to call the subscriptions URL again. But we're going to pass it in a query parameter of ID. And then the value of that ID is going to be the unsubscribed event that we're looking for at the current index of the loop.id. And then the HTTP headers are going to be the same ones that we got before. And within our then clause, we don't actually need any parameters, but we do need an arrow function. And that is just going to log the current index of the loop and then the name of the event that we just unsubscribed from and then unsubscribed. So just to give us, a lot of good information whenever we are done with our stream, we can know what things we have and have not unsubscribed from. Now that we've done all this, we now have all of the Chatbot functionality out of the way. So we can actually start on the EventSub specific functionality. So what we're going to do is we are going to create two constants, and I will copy and paste those in because it is quite a bit of information. So the first constant that we're going to create is an array called event types. And the event types array is going to contain the name of every Twitch EventSub event that we can subscribe to. And the second constant that we're going to create is called event types config. And this is a giant JSON object. And you'll notice that the keys for all of these JSON objects correlate to the array indexes of the event types array. And the reason for this is that the configurations for each event are actually somewhat different from each other, especially now that Twitch has started updating things like specifically the follower alert configuration. This is currently, at least at the time of recording this video, is the only event that has a version of 2. The rest of them currently have a version of 1, again, as of the recording of this video. And that's actually what caused me to re-record this video, because up to this point, all of the versions were 1, and so I had it hard-coded to check or to submit each EventSub subscription as version 1. And now that this is starting to change, that code breaks. And I also discovered, while fixing this, that certain conditions are not the same as others. So you'll notice that we have a lot of condition, broadcaster user ID, so on and so forth. But you'll notice in the follow event, we have more than one condition now. We have broadcaster user ID as well as moderator user ID. Now, why you would want to have a moderator user ID in order to get a Twitch follower alert, I have no idea. You can ask Twitch. But doing this allows me to set up the specific cases where the condition for each event changes slightly. So you'll notice here that on the drop entitlement grant, the condition is organization ID. And you'll also notice that I left in comments that I'm not sure if the value of the organization ID is correct, because this is for Twitch drops specifically. So if you're doing something that you're working with Twitch drops specifically, you're probably going to get a organization ID that is very different from your Twitch broadcaster ID. But I left this in as a placeholder. So whenever you're looking through the code, if you see something here that shows not sure if value is correct, that requires a very specific value that is going to be different depending on what you're doing with the specific event you're trying to subscribe to. So for now, that's for drops for extension events, and also for whenever someone grants or revokes access to your Twitch app. So there are, at the time of recording this video, there should be 45 different events that it should subscribe to. And whenever you unsubscribe from events, you're going to notice that it's going to say you subscribed to 45 events, but you unsubscribed from 41. And the reason for that is because these 4 events will not succeed in connecting because they're currently not getting the right values for the condition themselves. So if you do decide to use these, just replace this value right here with the correct organization ID or extension client ID that you're using for your specific use case. And if you're following along, I would highly suggest going to the GitHub repo for this, and I'll leave that in the description, to just copy and paste this huge JSON object, because as Twitch changes around their configurations for each event, I will do my best to keep these individual, event calls, the configurations up to date. And as they update and add more events that you can subscribe to, I will also put in those as well. So just to keep you up to date for that. Now that we've created these configuration objects, what we want to do is we want to also create 2 other constants in addition to that. So I'll just collapse these to save ourselves some room. So we want to have 2 new constants. And the first one we want to have is called ngrok URL. And we're just going to start this off as an empty string. And I'll explain what this is in a minute. We also want to have a let variable here, and we're going to call this access token, which you've probably noticed up to this point. We have called the access token variable a few times, but we haven't created it yet. So we're doing that now, and we're just going to have this also as an empty string. And now, right under where it says we have the number of events to subscribe to, we want to actually subscribe to the events within that gigantic EventSub config monstrosity object that we just showed. So we're going to make an axios.post call. And just as before, we'll add in then, and then catch, and then format it for some readability. The catch clause will just have an error leading into an arrow function that will just log out the error. The post URL is only going to take in one parameter this time, one argument this time, and it is going to be this gigantic, nasty URL. And what this is, and I would highly suggest just copying and pasting this from the GitHub repo, but what this is it first goes to the token URL and it grabs your API key from your Twitch app, and it also grabs your API secret, which should be just a really long, nasty string that you share with no one. And then the third query parameter here is all of the different types of permissions that you're giving to your bot. So if you want access to every EventSub event that Twitch gives you access to, just leave this as it is and just copy and paste it. But if you just want to give it very specific access, you can go through here and just remove the things that you don't want. And that also goes for the EventSub, or the event types and the event config object. So if you're going to remove access to certain things, like you only want your bot to do certain things, what I would recommend doing is going in the event types array right here and just commenting out the specific things that you don't want instead of just getting rid of them. Because in case you change your mind later, then you can just comment them back in. You don't need to worry about doing that with the event types config object, because once you comment out something within the event types array, it just won't access it within the event types config. So just to keep your life easier, just, do it that way. But coming back here, within the then clause, what we want is we want to have a response parameter leading into an arrow function. And within this arrow function, we want to make a constant of the response data, which is going to equal, unsurprisingly, the response.data. And then we want to say that our access token is going to be equal to our response data dot access token. And now that we have our access token, it's time to loop over the event types, and within each of the events that we find within our event types array up here, what we want to do is we want to make yet another Axios call. So we're going to say axios.post. And of course, we're going to have a then and a .catch format for readability. Within the catch clause, we will have a parameter of webhook error leading into an arrow function, which will just log out that we've had a webhook creation error, and then it will give us the error. For the address that we're trying to reach, what we're going to do is we're going to actually use our ngrok URL, and this is going to make sense in a minute because we actually need to set up an express server that will run all of this stuff, and that's the address that we're actually calling in order to create our webhooks. So we're going to call our ngrok URL, and then a string slash create webhook with the query parameter of event type like this. And then we're going to pass in the event types at the current index. Once we do that, if we succeed, we're just going to have a empty parameter arrow function, which will just log out the current index of the array that we're in, and then that we have successfully established a webhook connection, and then it'll give us the name of the webhook connection that we just made. And now that we are setting things up to actually have all of our events get subscribed to, the next thing that we need to do is some functions that will allow Twitch to do some security checks to make sure that we are who we say we are, and that we can verify that events coming to us are actually coming from Twitch. So this is something that is sort of required by the EventSub system. So we're going to set up a new function. We're going to set this up as an arrow function just to mix things up a little bit. So we're going to create a constant, and we're going to call this verify Twitch webhook signature. This is going to take in 4 parameters, but we're only going to use 2 of them. It's going to take in a request, a response, a buffer, and an encoding. And within this function, I'm actually going to do a bit of copying and pasting because this is a lot of typing, and I'm sure y'all don't want to watch me type for the next 20 minutes. So what we're doing here is we are creating 4 constants, and we're grabbing these from the, or at least 3 of them, we're grabbing from the headers that came in with the request, to get stuff from Twitch. Sorry, no, the stuff that's coming in from Twitch to us. So the request to us. And what we're doing is we're pulling in the message ID, the message timestamp, and the message signature. And the last constant that we have there is we are getting the current time in seconds. And we're going to need that momentarily. Well, actually, I need it right now. So we're going to say if, and I'm going to do a little more copying and pasting here. So we're going to say if the current time minus the timestamp that we just pulled in is greater than 600 seconds, meaning that if the timestamp that Twitch sent us is 10 minutes older than the current time, then that message is in error, and we need to throw an error as such. So we're going to throw a new error and say that the signature is older than 10 minutes and to ignore this request. And we're also doing this as an absolute value so that it's always a positive response. And the next condition that we want to check for is if we do not have a configuration Twitch signing secret. So if within our configuration file, we for some reason forgot to set our Twitch signing secret, then that means that we don't have one of the critical things that we need in order to make this whole system work. So we need to throw another error in that case and just say we don't have a signing secret. It's missing. And then to finish this off, if we pass those 2 checks, what we're doing next is we're going to create a message signature using the crypto package that we pulled in earlier. Now, I'm not very knowledgeable with cryptography at all, so I'm not even going to pretend to know much of what's going on here, but I just found this while researching stuff. So what we need to do is we need to create a hashed message signature that is using our Twitch signing secret. And so once we have that hash and that signature, what we're going to do is we are going to compare it to the signature that Twitch sent us. And so this is how we verify that it's actually Twitch sending us things, and Twitch can verify that it's actually us sending things back. So if those signatures do not match, then we throw a new error saying that the signature is invalid, and if they are the same, then we have a verified signature and everything is in the green and we can move on. And so the last function that we need to create is a function that allows us to actually do things with the Twitch events whenever they come in. So like whenever a follower alert comes in, a subscriber alert, or a raid, or what have you. So we're going to create a new arrow function, and we're going to call it Twitch Webhook Event Handler. And this is only going to take in one parameter, and that's going to be the webhook event itself. And as I said a moment ago, this function is where you're actually going to do things whenever you get an event. So what I've done for you is I'm just going to copy and paste in some scaffolding code for you for the common events that you're going to be dealing with. So you're going to have scaffolding for if your stream goes online, or if you change your stream title or your game, you can do something specific here. Or if you get a follower alert or a subscriber alert or a resub, or if someone gifts subs or cheers or someone raids. So you can just put in the code that you want within these specific if-else statements, and that should help you to get started. But that's not the scope of this video. I'm just doing that as a courtesy for you. So now that we have all of the necessary functions that we need, we can set up the server, the Express server, that's going to allow us to actually subscribe to EventSub events and get event notifications when they happen. So follows, subs, cheers, what have you. So what we're going to do is we are going to set up our HTTPS app to use our express.static folder. So what we're doing is we're saying that any files or web pages that we're going to be pulling from are going to come from the underscore dir name. That's a keyword within, I want to say it's specific to Node, but I could be mistaken. We're going to say the directory name that we're in, plus then a string /HTML. The next thing we want to do is we want to say the HTTP out .use again, and this time we want to do something with all of the JSON that gets pulled in both from Twitch, usually mostly from Twitch. So we want to verify that the JSON that we're pulling in from Twitch is actually what we want to get. So we're going to say express.json, and this, as a function, is going to take in a JSON object as a argument, which is just going to have one attribute. So verify, and that verify attribute is just going to take in our verify Twitch webhook signature function that we made before. So this is how we're going to make sure that all the stuff that is coming in from Twitch that's being sent to Twitch is actually in the green. So now we can actually start our HTTPS server. So we're going to listen specifically on port 4000, and the second argument is going to be a function with no parameters, and it's just going to log out that the HTTPS server has started. Have fun. And now we can collapse that, and we can start setting up our express routes, which we only need 3. So we first want to set up a get route, and this route's going to be pretty simple. The route itself is going to be /redirect, and if you're following along, you'll probably recognize that redirect route is the one that we set up in our instructions earlier as the reroute thing for the OAuth. So within this second parameter, we're going to have a function with a request and a response parameter. So just a normal function, and it's just going to return a response dot send file, and the argument here is going to be the underscore your name plus, and then a string, and then slash HTML slash app access redirect.html, which is that HTML file that I encouraged you to create earlier. And I seem to have gotten my parentheses mixed up a little bit, so I just fixed that for you real quick in case you noticed it. And that's going to be it for that route. So the next route that we want to create is a post route. So we're going to say https app.post, which will again take in 2 arguments. So the route for this one is actually going to be Twitch webhooks / callback. And for this one, we will just use an async arrow function. And this will take in 2, it's going to do it like this so I don't mix up my parentheses again. Okay, so this one is going to also take in a request and a response. I'll just move it right here. Hopefully it'll be more readable. And this is the route that's going to be used whenever Twitch sends us an event. So every time we get a follow, every time we get a sub, so on, this route will be hit. And just like with verifying the webhook signature, Twitch requires us to also, I'll paste this in, accept a challenge sometimes that we need to pass in order to actually receive the request and do something with it. So just again, making sure that everybody's talking to the right person. So what we're doing is we're grabbing in the request header. We're saying if that request header for the EventSub message type is webhook callback verification, then we're just checking to see if the webhook is from Twitch. And I had to do a little bit of workarounds with this because Node.js kept trying to mess with the headers and how you write and send and receive things. So this is kind of a old school way of doing it, but this does work. So if we pass the challenge from Twitch, what we're next going to do is we are going to handle the Twitch event itself. And to do that, we will first create a constant called event body, which will just be equal to the request.body. Then we will log out the event that we just received. So just to make it easy for us, this is the event. So we're going to receive, we're going to say we're saying that we are receiving the subscription type. So this is what's going to say if this is a follow, if this is a sub, if this is a raid, so on. Request store, and then we're going to say, it's probably going to say your username right here for your channel. And then we're going to show the JSON object that is the event itself. So if you ever want to see, as things are coming in, what's the specific data that you're getting so that you can maybe make some specific things for your implementation based on the data that you get. You can just see the data that you're pulling in. And so now that we have received an event, we need to very quickly do something with it, because what happens is Twitch will only give us a second or two to do something with the event that they've given us before they're like, well, I don't know if they got the event. We better send it to them again. And if that happens, you'll get obviously duplicate data, and eventually they'll just stop sending those pings. I don't know if it'll stop sending them altogether or if it'll just stop sending that ping. But I know for sure from the documentation that you need to handle these events very quickly, which is why we created the Twitch webhook event handler earlier. So what you want to do is you just want to call the Twitch webhook event handler, and then just throw in the event body. What that does is it just takes the event, tosses it over to the function so it can be handled outside of this post request, and then we can just send a response back to Twitch almost immediately with a status of 200, which is what they're looking for, saying, and all this is saying is, yeah, we got it. You're good. You don't have to send it again. And then we end the connection. And that's how we handle events. So we just pull in the event from Twitch, we toss it over to our Twitch webhook events handler, and then we just close the connection and wait until the next event comes in. So now that we've done with this, we can close that and we can get the last route of this implementation. That last route is going to be another post route. So just like before, we have a route of, in this one, we're going to say create webhook. And just like before, we will create an arrow function with the parameters of a request and response. And this one is going to require some pretty specific configuration. So I'll just copy and paste some stuff and explain as I go. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a variable that is the webhook parameters that we're sending to Twitch. This is what's going to allow us to subscribe to events from Twitch and actually listen for those follows, subs, and so on. So what we're doing is we're sending a request over to api.twitch.tv, specifically to the route of helix/EventSub/subscriptions. This is going to be a post request. And just like before, with our Axios calls, we need to send in some HTTP headers. So we're specifically sending in a content type of application/JSON. So this is all going to be JSON data that they're getting. And they need our client ID and our bearer token, our access token, just the same as before. And now that we've sent them that, we can then send them a specific event that we want to subscribe to. And that is going to be this right here. So this is going to be the webhook body. So if you've seen the last video that I did on making event subs, you'll notice that this version is a little different. So instead of passing in the configuration, just hard code it in right here and only passing in the name as the request query event type, what we're doing instead is we're using the config object, that giant JSON object that we created up top. So this thing up here, this just monstrous configuration object that holds a bunch of other objects, we're taking the configuration from this and putting it in to the webhook body. And so what we're doing is we're using the spread operator, which is these three dots, to then take in the specific configuration for the event type that we're looking for, which is why we had the event types. The keys for those objects be the same name as the array indexes that they correlated to, so that we could do this call. And then we have the second part of the body, the second attribute that it wants, being the transport, as this can be hard-coded because this is what they want for every single webhook subscription. This is necessary because this tells Twitch where to send the events back to us, which is the indie rock URL / the Twitch webhook / callback, which we just created up here. So now that we've got that, we can finish this up by just taking in the response data from Twitch. And this is something that I found. I want to say I found it in one of the official Twitch examples for how to accept a webhook, or rather how to sign up to an EventSub webhook. So you take in the response data, you create a variable as an empty string, and then you make the HTTPS request right here. So you're setting your encoding to UTF-8, and you're waiting to say once you get data, you're going to set your response data variable to the response data that you just pulled in. And then you wait for the connection to end. You set your response body to the response data, or the parsed response data. So once you've gotten your data and you're done with it, you then set it, the parsed JSON object, to the response body, and then you send the response body. And so then you just wait for errors, and if there's any errors, you just console log it out. And then once you're done, you write out the stringified webhook body and then end the connection. And now that we're done with all of this, we've actually finished with all of the necessary coding elements of this system. We can return to the GitHub repository. So now that you've got all this, what you want to do is you actually want to start the bot. So you want to make sure that you're in the source folder. So specifically the source folder right here. So after you're done with all this, your command line should be in the cert folder. So if you want to get back up to the source folder, you just cd ... in the command line. But if you're not in the source folder, just get to the source folder. And then you want to run the bot. So node bot.js. And like I say here, you're going to get a bunch of errors. But don't worry about that, because we're still setting up some things within our configuration file. So then what you want to do is you want to copy this nasty address right here and paste it into your browser. And before you hit go, you want to replace this bit right here with your Twitch API key. Otherwise, this won't work. You do have to replace the 20 brackets here. You don't want those, so just remove those. And this address right here may grow or shrink depending on when you see this video. Because like I said, I'm going to update this as Twitch updates their EventSub system. So, but this is generally the address you want. Just take it as it is currently on the GitHub repo. Just put that in your address bar, replace this with your API key, and then hit go. What that's going to do is it's going to send you to that page that you see a lot whenever you're trying to give access to a Twitch app to your Twitch account. So like, you know, those pages that says Twitch is warning you and showing you that this page or this app wants to access your email address, control your follower alerts, so on and so forth, and then you have to accept it. So this is going to be a list of everything that you can do with a Twitch bot. So it's going to be a giant list. And so once you accept that, it's going to redirect you to your page that we created earlier, that HTML page that allows you to just know that you've given your bot permissions to use the EventSub system. Now, you might, whenever you use that link, it might give a warning in your browser saying that, hey, this site isn't secure. And the reason that is because we created that self-signed certificate up here so that we can actually do this over HTTPS. So your browser just doesn't recognize that you're using a self-signed certificate. and so it doesn't trust it. And so all you have to do is just dig in to that page and find a spot where it says, I'm okay with the risk, just move on, because you're just moving into a page that was created on your computer. So it's perfectly safe. So once you've given your app the permissions that it needs, as we say here, you just want to close the bot and then come back and then go up to the Twitch webhook event handler right here and then implement whatever logic you want for how you want to handle certain events. And I've left you a link right here for the full list of events that you can get. And once you've done that, what you can do is you can come back to here. You can see how to run the bot and actually get the events to be subscribed to and then, pulled in whenever they happen. So you want to open a separate PowerShell window. And it doesn't matter what folder you're in. You just want to put in this command right here into the PowerShell or command line, whatever it is, and then press enter. And that is going to look something like this. So once you put in this command, it's going to pull up something like this. So what you want to do is you want to highlight this address right here and then Control C to copy it. And then you want to come back to your bot code and then scroll up to where it says indie-rock URL. And then within that string, you just paste it. Now that you've got that, you can open a separate command line. I'll just use the one that's within my IDE and go into your source folder, and I'll just pull this up so you can see it a bit better. So just go into your source folder and hit node and then bot.js. Hit enter and it's going to. So it threw an error, and I noticed whenever checking my preparation code that if I go up to here, so on line 10, there was something wrong, and this is your problem. So you don't want this to be called as a function. You want this to just be referenced. So with that, you can come back to your terminal, load bot.js, and it says, okay, so we just got a whole bunch of success stuff. And so if we go to the top here, you'll notice that it says we have 45 events that we are to subscribe. And so we run through all of them. And since we're going to get responses slower from certain events than others, you'll notice that it's kind of out of order, but it does hit them all. And then it goes through and it verifies all of the ones that we successfully connected to. And then to show that we can also unsubscribe from events, I've gone into my Twitch chat and I'm typing in exclamation point end stream. And then once we hit it, you'll notice that, again, we got a big list of things that we unsubscribed from. But you'll notice, as I said before, that we unsubscribed from 41 events, but we subscribed, or we attempted to subscribe to 45. So we only unsubscribed from 41 because we only successfully subscribed to 41. And that was because of those specific events that I mentioned earlier that you need to put in information for your specific use case. So like an extension or, something like that, or Twitch drops. And that is everything that you need to know to implement EventSubs in your Twitch application. So hopefully Twitch doesn't go off and redesign any of their major connections or usages for how to do this stuff, so I don't need to make this video again. But if this has been valuable for you, please consider subscribing, giving the video a like, maybe leaving a comment. That would help me out a lot. And if you have any ideas for other things that you would like to see me build, please let me know. And if you would like to know how I implemented the Twitch event subsystem for my purposes, you can check out the Build a Twitch Bot from Scratch series that I've been working on, and I'll leave the link for that right above my head. So thanks again for watching. Jesus loves you. Stay awesome.